My name is Stuart. I'm 37 years old, a supervisor at Thornberry Systems in Columbus, Ohio. I've spent the last 6 years married to Carmen, the woman I thought I'd grow old with. We bought our house 4 years ago, a modest 3-bedroom on the east side, the kind of place people drive by and say, they're doing all right. It wasn't much, but it was ours, at least it used to feel that way. That night, though, it didn't feel like mine. My clothes were dumped on the couch like garbage, tossed there by my wife's hands. I sat in silence, the cushions sinking under me, the faint smell of detergent and Marcus's cologne lingering on the throw pillow I'd been handed as if it was some kind of consolation prize. Above me, I could hear the muffled bass of Marcus's television. My television, in my house, paid for with my money, and yet I was the one exiled to the living room like an intruder overstaying his welcome. Carmen's voice still echoed in my head, "Think about how you treat my brother." I had thought about it, relentlessly. I thought about the 8 months I'd been paying his phone bill, the weekly grocery runs that doubled in price, the tools he borrowed and never returned, the truck he took without asking, always bringing it back on fumes. For over a year, he'd treated my spare bedroom like a permanent lease-free apartment, setting up his gaming rig and scattering his laundry like confetti. And I, idiot that I was, had treated him like family. That was the part that burned. Family was supposed to mean respect, gratitude, reciprocity. Instead, it had become a shield he hid behind while draining me dry. And somehow, in Carmen's eyes, I was the villain. I lay back on that couch, staring at the ceiling. The paint was slightly cracked above the corner vent, something I'd been meaning to fix for months but never had the time, working overtime, managing bills, making sure everyone else was taken care of. That's what I did. That's what I'd always done. But tonight, staring at that cracked paint, it hit me, no one was looking out for me. Carmen defended Marcus at every turn. She excused him when he left dishes for days, when he skipped out on chores, when he called DoorDash on my card. She gave him protection I'd never seen her extend to me. "He's going through a rough patch," she'd say. A patch that had lasted 1 year and 3 months. My patience wasn't just running thin, it had evaporated. I shifted on the couch, the springs groaning beneath me, and something inside me shifted too. It wasn't the kind of hot, door-slamming rage that made you yell until your throat burned. No. This was quieter, deeper. A tide rolling in slow and steady, cold enough to change the coastline forever. I had been fighting for balance, for peace, for respect in my own house. I'd begged for it, bargained for it, reasoned for it. And in return, Carmen had tossed me out of my own bed to make space for her brother's freeloading. I'd been so consumed with keeping the peace that I hadn't realized I was the only one fighting for it. I rose from the couch, bare feet pressing into the cool wood floor, and moved toward the kitchen. It was 3:30 in the morning. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and Marcus's TV still going upstairs. I brewed coffee, the bitter smell filling the air. I sat down at the same table where just hours earlier I had laid out our budget, tried to have a reasonable discussion. The same table where Marcus had laughed in my face. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, the provider, the man responsible for the roof, the bills, the groceries, exiled to a couch while the parasite upstairs lived like a king. And my wife. She was his shield, his advocate, his partner in enabling. I took my first sip of coffee and let the bitterness burn my tongue. And in that bitter burn, I found clarity. This wasn't about groceries. It wasn't about utilities, or missing tools, or even the scratch truck. It was about betrayal. Carmen had chosen her brother over me, over us, over everything we'd built. She'd chosen him every single time, and she hadn't even pretended otherwise tonight. For the first time in months, I stopped asking myself how to fix this. I stopped wondering what conversation would finally make her see my side. I stopped bargaining with myself about timelines and compromises. I stopped caring about making her comfortable while I sat in discomfort. The decision didn't come with anger or fireworks. It came like gravity, inevitable, undeniable, permanent. I wasn't going to fight anymore. I wasn't going to beg to be heard in my own house. I wasn't going to keep bleeding myself dry while they called me selfish. I was done. And in the stillness of that kitchen, with Marcus's TV humming upstairs and Carmen asleep in the bed I'd bought, I began making a plan. Marcus hadn't just moved into my house. He'd colonized it. It started in January of the previous year. Carmen had told me he'd gone through a bad breakup, lost his apartment in Cleveland, and needed a place to crash. Just for a few weeks, Stuart, she'd said. Until he gets back on his feet. I'd agreed, because that's what you do for family. I'd done it before. My own brother Jacob had stayed with me when his marriage collapsed. But Jacob had been gone in 6 weeks, apartment keys in hand, groceries bought every Friday to cover his share. That was family. That was respect. Marcus. He was different. From the moment he arrived, he set up shop like a man on permanent vacation. He dumped his gaming PC in the spare bedroom, wires trailing across the carpet like he'd been planning the setup for months. His clothes spilled out of duffel bags onto the floor. Within days, that room wasn't a guest space anymore, it was Marcus's headquarters. At first, I told myself it was temporary. The first month, I gave him grace. The second month, I gave him patience. By the third, I started nudging. So, Marcus, been looking at job listings. He'd nod, mumble something about the market being tough, and then retreat to his glowing monitors where explosions and gunfire rattled through the walls late into the night. 6 months in, I dropped the nudges. I started having real conversations. "Mantaman," I said one evening in the garage, my tools scattered because he'd borrowed half of them. "You've been here a while now. I'm not asking for rent, but maybe groceries. Maybe utilities." He'd nodded, agreed, even clapped me on the shoulder like we'd just sealed a pact. And then, nothing. Not 1 cent. Instead, the losses piled up. My tools disappeared, some reappearing months later covered in rust, others gone forever. My truck developed scratches and dents I couldn't account for. Marcus, of course, never noticed them. Every time I turned the key, the gas tank needle hovered at empty, because Marcus never filled it. The freeloading was bad enough, but what gnawed at me was the entitlement. He didn't act like a guest. He acted like the house owed him something. Like I owed him something. And Carmen. She always had an excuse ready. "He's been applying, Stuart. He just needs a chance." Or "He's dealing with depression, you can't push him." Her tone had changed, too. When Jacob stayed, she'd been grateful for his help with chores, respectful of the boundaries we set. With Marcus, she treated every one of my requests like an attack, every frustration like a flaw in me. The double standard was blinding. My brother had paid for groceries, done the dishes, respected the space. Marcus. He turned my kitchen into a revolving door of takeout boxes and left the sink stacked with plates like he thought a dishwasher fairy would clean them. Yet somehow, I was the unreasonable one for noticing. I'd grown used to hearing the excuses, the endless list of reasons why Marcus couldn't work. Too early, too far, not enough pay, wrong kind of job. Every excuse crafted with the confidence of a man who'd never once lifted a finger to cover his own expenses. But what stayed with me most wasn't the money. It was the atmosphere. The way my own home, my safe place after long days at Thornberry Systems, had become a place I dreaded. I'd walk in from work, steel-toed boots aching, and find Marcus sprawled across the couch, controller in hand, his shoes kicked off like he owned the place. The TV blaring, takeout bags on the coffee table, Carmen sitting beside him, laughing at something on the screen. And me. I wasn't coming home. I was intruding. That's the part people don't understand until they live it. Freeloaders don't just drain your wallet, they drain your dignity. They take your home, room by room, until you're the stranger. By the 1-year mark, I didn't just resent Marcus. I started to hate what Carmen turned into when she defended him. That blind loyalty, that constant shield, the way she painted me as the selfish one for daring to ask that a grown man contribute something. Anything. I wasn't just losing money anymore. I was losing my marriage. The night it finally snapped wasn't spectacular. No shouting match in the driveway, no cops called, no neighbors peeking through their blinds. It was quieter than that, small enough to look ordinary, but heavy enough that I knew the line had been crossed for good. It was a Tuesday. I'd just worked a 12-hour shift. The plant had been running short-staffed all week, and I'd picked up the slack because that's what supervisors do. By the time I got home, my back ached, my boots felt like concrete, and I wanted nothing more than to sit down with dinner and silence. Instead, I walked into chaos. The kitchen table, the same one where I'd sat with Carmen, mapping out our budget in careful rows of numbers, was covered in greasy pizza boxes and half-empty soda cans. The smell hit me first: old cheese, congealed sauce, warm beer. Then I noticed the floor. A smear of orange buffalo sauce tracked across the tile, leading straight to the fridge, which hung open like some forgotten cave. And there he was. Marcus. Shirtless, barefoot, tugging a can of beer from the fridge like he was in his own apartment. I froze in the doorway. "Really?" I said, my voice sharper than I intended. He didn't even look guilty. He just shrugged, popped the tab, and said, "Relax, man. It's just food." That was it. Not thanks, not sorry I made a mess in your kitchen. Just relax. I didn't relax. I marched past him, slammed the fridge door, and started gathering up the pizza boxes. Carmen appeared then, hair tied back, a frown already on her face. She didn't ask Marcus why he hadn't cleaned. She didn't tell him to help. No, her eyes went straight to me. "Stuart," she said, as if I were the one standing shirtless, drinking beer I hadn't paid for. "Can you not come home like this? It's been a long day." I laughed. I actually laughed, sharp, bitter, humorless. A long day. For him. What exactly has Marcus done today, Carmen? Besides wreck my kitchen and drink my beer. Marcus finally spoke up, slow and cocky, like he'd been waiting for this. "It's not just your beer, man. We all live here." Those words. We all live here. The audacity of it. As if bills magically paid themselves, as if the mortgage fairy dropped by every first of the month, as if he had a stake in this house that he'd never contributed a dime toward. I turned to Carmen, searching her face for some shred of acknowledgement, some flicker of agreement that this had gone too far. Instead, she crossed her arms and said, "You're being dramatic. His family." Family. Always that word, used like a weapon against me. Something inside me gave way then, not an explosion, not a shout, but a cold fracture, clean and final. I looked at Carmen, then at Marcus, and realized they were united in something I wasn't part of. Not a marriage. Not a household. A fortress, built on my labor, my money, my patience. A fortress I wasn't welcome in, even as I stood in the center of it. I put down the pizza box. My hands were steady. My voice was steady too, steadier than I'd expected. "You're right," I said. "We all live here." I let the words hang for a moment, let them taste their own hypocrisy. But not for long. Neither of them understood what I meant. Not yet. But as I walked away, back toward the couch they'd exiled me to, I wasn't thinking about fairness anymore. I wasn't thinking about compromise, or about how to fix things. I was thinking about ending things. Not with fists. Not with yelling. Something quieter. Smarter. Permanent. For the first time in months, the exhaustion in my bones didn't feel heavy. It felt sharp. Purposeful. The breaking point wasn't the end. It was the beginning. I didn't sleep that night. The couch creaked under my weight as I lay staring at the ceiling, the glow from Marcus's TV upstairs flickering faintly against the wall. The house felt alive, like it was breathing against me, mocking me with every hum of the refrigerator, every footstep from above. I realized then that nothing would change on its own. No talk, no negotiation, no compromise. Carmen had made her choice, and Marcus had taken root. The balance was broken, and the only way to restore it was to tip the scales myself. It wasn't rage that kept me awake. Rage burns hot and quick, like a match, bright for a moment, then gone. What I felt was colder, heavier. A slow, deliberate weight pressing against my ribs, reshaping the way I thought. For months I'd begged, reasoned, pleaded. That part of me was dead now. What remained was the planner, the strategist, the man who spent his life managing systems, spotting weaknesses, solving problems. And this was a problem. By 5 a.m., the outline of a plan had formed. Not a full picture, just pieces, fragments, but enough to light the path ahead. Step 1. Gather information. Marcus thought he was clever, hiding his laziness behind excuses, telling Carmen half-truths about job applications, bad interviews, and phantom opportunities. But freeloaders always slipped up. I'd start small, tracking patterns, noticing habits. He had routines, addictions, comforts. Every man did. And every routine was leverage waiting to be exploited. Step 2. Money. Marcus had none, but Carmen and I shared everything. Our accounts, our credit cards, the house title. If Marcus was thriving off me, it was because Carmen had opened the door for him to do it. She was his shield, his enabler. To get rid of Marcus, I'd need to cut the shield away first. Quietly. Slowly. Without her realizing until it was too late. Step 3. Isolation. Freeloaders thrived in safety. Marcus knew Carmen would protect him, and Carmen knew I'd eventually back down. But what happened if that chain broke? What happened if Marcus was forced to stand alone? I pictured it. The smugness gone from his face. The controller slipping from his hand. The sudden realization that his castle wasn't built on stone, it was built on my patience, and that patience had run out. The thought didn't make me smile. It didn't bring joy. It brought clarity. At 6 a.m., I brewed coffee. The bitter steam rose in the kitchen as the sun broke through the blinds. Carmen came down later, yawning, hair tangled, wearing the same disinterested frown she always wore when she saw me on the couch. "You didn't sleep?" she asked, her voice flat. "No," I said. My tone was calm, even. That seemed to unsettle her more than anger would have. She poured herself a mug, didn't look at me as she asked, "You're not still mad about last night, are you?" I looked at her over the rim of my cup. Mad. That was too small a word. I wasn't mad, I was resolved. But I didn't tell her that. Instead, I said, "No. I'm not mad." And for the first time, it wasn't a lie. Because mad meant I still cared about fighting. And I didn't. I was finished fighting. I was planning. The first rule of dismantling a parasite is simple: you don't strike first. You watch. You wait. You let them reveal the cracks in their own armor. So I watched. Marcus thought he was unpredictable, but men like him always fell into patterns. And patterns were my specialty. I'd spent years at Thornberry Systems mapping production cycles, predicting bottlenecks, solving problems before anyone else even noticed them. Marcus was easier than any machine. He woke up late, usually around noon. His mornings started with energy drinks, 3 or 4 at a time, stacked like trophies beside his gaming chair. He'd scroll on his phone for an hour, then spend the afternoon bouncing between online games and whatever half-baked side hustle he pretended to be working on. But it was the nights that revealed the most. Every Thursday, he drove my truck to some bar on East Broad. Always Thursday, always the same place. He'd come home around 2 a.m., reeking of smoke and cheap liquor, stumbling through the door loud enough to wake the house. And every time, Carmen defended him, "He's just blowing off steam, Stuart. Don't be so uptight." That routine told me 2 things: Marcus was careless, and Marcus was predictable. Both fatal flaws. Then there was the money, or lack of it. Marcus liked to act like he was between jobs, but I'd started peeking when he left his phone around. Bank notifications, emails. His account was bone dry. He lived entirely on Carmen's sympathy and my resources. That dependency wasn't just weakness, it was leverage. And Carmen. She was easier to read than she realized. She wanted to believe Marcus was trying. She clung to the idea that he was one step away from turning it all around, because admitting the truth, that her brother was a leech, would mean admitting she'd chosen him over me for nothing. Her blind spot was her pride. If I could expose Marcus in a way she couldn't deny, her shield would shatter. But exposure alone wasn't enough. Parasites squirm, make excuses, find new ways to burrow in. No, I needed precision. Evidence. Patterns stacked so high they couldn't be ignored. So I started collecting. Receipts he left in the truck. Empty bottles in the trash. Bank alerts on his phone when he forgot to lock it. Photos of the pizza boxes, the mess, the dents in my tools. Every careless footprint he left behind became part of the case. I didn't confront. I didn't accuse. I didn't even sigh in front of Carmen anymore. I just documented. Silently. Patiently. Because parasites survive on noise, arguments, excuses, sympathy. Silence unsettles them. And my silence was deafening. At night, while Carmen slept upstairs beside her brother's muffled laughter, I sat on the couch scrolling through the notes I'd compiled. Dates, times, details. Patterns tightening like a noose. Every move he made, every lie Carmen defended, every cent he drained, it all had weight now. Evidence. Ammunition. And when the time came to fire, there would be no escape. The first move had to be small. Subtle. Not enough to raise alarms, but just enough to tug at Marcus's safety net, to see how he'd react when things didn't go his way. Thursday night came like clockwork. I heard the front door slam, his footsteps stumbling across the hardwood, his voice carrying up the stairs as he bragged to Carmen about some bar fight he almost got into. I lay there on the couch, eyes closed, steadying my breathing, listening to every careless word. The next morning, I made my move. Marcus always used my truck for his bar runs, always left it parked half crooked in the driveway with the gas tank near empty. I'd had enough of that. So before sunrise, I slipped out with a siphon hose and an old gas can from the shed. Took what little fuel he'd left and drained it into the can. Then I popped the hood, loosened the battery connection, just enough that the engine wouldn't turn over without a good shove. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would scream sabotage. Just an inconvenience. By 11 a.m., I was sipping coffee in the kitchen when I heard the first attempt. The ignition clicked, the starter whined, but nothing caught. A pause. Then again, grinding, sputtering, failure. From the window, I watched him. Shirtless, barefoot on the gravel, cursing under his breath as he slammed the door. He popped the hood, stared into the engine like it was written in a foreign language, then kicked the tire and stormed back inside. "Carmen," he yelled, voice echoing through the house. "Your husband's truck is dead." Your husband's truck. Not his truck, not the truck, but mine. The slip made me smile. Carmen came down a minute later, pulling on a hoodie, already frowning at me as if I were guilty. "Stuart, what's wrong with the truck?" I shrugged, calm, casual. "Runs fine for me. Maybe Marcus doesn't know how to treat it." Marcus exploded. "I didn't do anything. I just turned the key, and it wouldn't start." I sipped my coffee, kept my eyes steady on him. Funny. Never happens to me. Silence followed. Thick, uncomfortable silence. Carmen glanced between us, and for the first time, I saw it, the faintest flicker of doubt in her eyes. A seed planted. That was all I needed. Later that afternoon, while Marcus sulked in his room, I reconnected the battery. By evening, the truck roared to life like nothing had ever happened. And Marcus? He looked rattled. The fortress didn't feel so safe anymore. That was the test. And it worked. Because now he knew, his comfort wasn't guaranteed. And he didn't know why. The beauty of dismantling someone's world isn't in the explosion. It's in the silence before they realize the walls are caving in. After the truck incident, Marcus grew paranoid. He started double-checking things, rattling my keys before tossing them onto the counter, tapping at the hood latch when he thought no one was watching, even smelling the gas cap like a dog sniffing for intruders. His swagger dimmed, replaced with suspicion. Good. I wanted him jumpy. The next step was about routine. Marcus thrived on predictability, his late nights out, his 12-hour gaming marathons, his bottomless appetite funded by my wallet. Disrupt that rhythm, and he'd unravel. So, I started with the internet. One quiet Saturday morning, while Carmen was out running errands, I slipped into the utility closet and unplugged the router. Waited 30 minutes. Plugged it back in. By the time Marcus stomped downstairs in his wrinkled t-shirt, headset around his neck, his face was a storm cloud. "Internet's down," he barked, glaring at me like I'd cut the cable myself. "Probably just the service," I said, flipping open the newspaper with deliberate calm. "These things happen." He cursed under his breath, stomped around the living room, rebooted the modem twice, then finally trudged back upstairs. An hour later, I unplugged it again. 30 more minutes of silence. Then another angry outburst. By evening, Carmen came home to Marcus pacing like a caged animal. "Stu, can't you call the internet company?" she asked, exasperated. "Already did," I lied smoothly. "They said there's no outage in the area. Maybe it's his setup." Marcus glared but said nothing. For the first time, I saw him hesitate, like maybe, just maybe, this wasn't my fault, but his own rotten luck. Then I moved to food. I began buying less at the store. No chips, no frozen pizza, no easy junk. Just the basics: eggs, rice, chicken, vegetables. Real food you had to cook. Marcus, of course, hated it. By the third night, he stood in the kitchen, rummaging through empty shelves, his face twisted in disgust. Where's the frozen stuff? The wings? The burritos? We're cutting back, I said evenly. Money's tight. You want extras, you buy them yourself. Carmen frowned but stayed quiet. Even she couldn't argue with an empty grocery bill staring back at us. It wasn't just about starving him of internet and snacks, it was about starving him of comfort. Every small inconvenience piled onto his fragile ego like bricks. And each time, I was there, calm and unshaken, while he fumed. But the most important move wasn't material, it was psychological. I started recording things. Subtle, almost invisible. A voice memo app on my phone during arguments. Copies of bank statements showing Carmen's withdrawals. Screenshots of late-night food orders on my credit card. I built a file, evidence. Not because I needed proof for myself. No. I needed it for the inevitable moment when Carmen would be forced to see her brother for what he really was. Every net has to be tightened slowly, silently. And by the time the prey notices, it's already too late. Marcus had always worn his arrogance like armor. Loud, careless laughter at dinner. Sarcastic jabs about my uptight supervisor energy. But armor only works when it never gets tested. Chip away at it long enough, and even the strongest mask starts to crack. The first real crack came on a Tuesday night. Carmen was working late at the clinic. I was in the living room, scrolling through my phone, when Marcus thundered down the stairs, controller still in hand. His face was flushed, jaw tight. Internet dropped again, he snapped, shoving the router onto the coffee table. This thing's garbage. You're supposed to handle this stuff, Stu. It's your house, your equipment. My equipment, I repeated, letting the words sink into him like a knife. He froze for a half second. Then his mask slipped. Don't play games with me, he said, voice rising. I can't do anything in this dump without something breaking. No food. No internet. That truck of yours barely runs. You're lucky Carmen even puts up with you. The arrogance was still there, but his voice, it cracked. He was rattled, angry, and beneath it, scared. I stood slowly, not rushing, not raising my tone. Careful, Marcus. You're standing in a house you don't pay for, eating food you didn't buy, using things you don't own. And you've got the nerve to call it a dump. He scoffed, but the words hit. His eyes flicked toward the door like he wanted to storm out, but he didn't. He couldn't. He had nowhere else to go. That was the moment. The mask split. He lashed out the only way he knew how, by dragging Carmen into it. At least she understands family. She doesn't make me feel like trash for needing help. You're not a brother. You're just some guy she married. Replaceable. Replaceable. The word hung between us like a match dropped in gasoline. He meant it as an insult, but all it did was sharpen my resolve. I stepped closer, close enough that he had to tilt his head to keep eye contact. My voice dropped low, steady. You're right, Marcus. I'm not your brother. Which means my patience has an expiration date. And when it's up, you'll know. For the first time since he moved in, Marcus didn't have a comeback. He just stared, chest rising fast, controller shaking slightly in his hand. That's when Carmen walked in. She took one look at us, at the tension in the room, and frowned. What's going on here? Marcus spoke first, too quickly. Your husband's threatening me. I didn't take my eyes off him. I said nothing of the sort. I told him the truth, that I won't keep living like this. Carmen looked between us, her face tightening, that familiar wall of defense rising to protect him. But Marcus, he wouldn't meet her eyes. His mask was gone. And she noticed. For the first time, she noticed. And that was enough. Because the moment doubt enters, it spreads like fire. The mask had cracked. And soon, It would shatter completely. If Marcus's mask had cracked, Carmen's blindness was still intact. The moment she stepped into that room, she wrapped herself around her brother's fragility like a shield, and I became the enemy all over again. What did you say to him, Stuart? Her voice was sharp, protective, the same tone she used when the neighbor's dog barked too loud at Marcus in the backyard. I told him the truth, I said calmly. That this situation isn't sustainable. That he can't keep living here like a parasite. Parasite? Carmen's eyes went wide with fury. That's my brother you're talking about. Marcus, emboldened by her outrage, straightened his shoulders. See? This is what I deal with every day. He treats me like I'm garbage, like I don't matter. He wants me out on the street. I barked a short laugh, bitter and humorless. Marcus, you've been in this house for over a year. You've had food, shelter, and my truck at your disposal. Not once have you paid a bill. Not once have you thanked me. And now you want to play the victim. Carmen stepped between us like she was warding off a fight. Stuart, stop. You know he's been struggling. You know what he went through after his breakup. I looked at her, really looked at her, and what I saw made my chest ache more than the anger ever could. She believed it. She believed every excuse, every lie, every sob story he fed her. Because believing him meant she didn't have to face the truth, that her loyalty to Marcus was costing her everything else. You think depression looks like this? I said, gesturing at Marcus. Sleeping till noon, playing video games all night, draining someone else's bank account? That's not depression, Carmen. That's laziness dressed up as tragedy. Her lips tightened, eyes narrowing. You don't understand family. Family means you stand by them no matter what. You don't tally up every favor like some accountant. The words stung because they came from her, the woman I thought I was building a life with. And yet, they were hollow, rehearsed. Words Marcus had fed her for months. I leaned in, my voice cold, deliberate. Family doesn't mean bleeding someone dry while they smile in your face. Family doesn't mean lying about money. And it sure as hell doesn't mean putting your brother before your husband. Her face flushed red, but she didn't answer. She couldn't. Because somewhere, deep down, she knew I was right. Marcus muttered under his breath, pathetic. That one word was gasoline. Carmen whipped her head toward him. Marcus, don't. But it was too late. The room went still. The silence wasn't mine anymore, it was hers. For the first time, she wasn't defending him. She was warning him. And I saw it, the fracture. Small, but real. Carmen's defense was still blind, but now it had a crack in it. Just like her brother's mask. And once both were broken, there'd be no putting them back together. The trick to dismantling people like Marcus, and those who shield them, isn't brute force. It's patience. Quiet, calculated patience. After that fight in the living room, Carmen retreated into her usual pattern, silence followed by cold distance. She didn't speak much to me at dinner, didn't kiss me goodnight. And Marcus, of course, strutted around like he'd won something. But I wasn't interested in their moods anymore. I was interested in proof. So I started collecting. It began with the money. Carmen thought she was clever, withdrawing small amounts of cash every few days to cover Marcus's late-night cravings, his smokes, whatever scraps he demanded. But I had the bank app on my phone. Screenshots stacked up fast, $40 here, $60 there, always traced back to her card. Always consistent with the nights Marcus stumbled in with greasy takeout bags. Then the credit card statements. I pulled records of pizza orders, streaming subscriptions, even online game purchases. All in Marcus's name, but on my dime. Evidence of freeloading spelled out in black and white. Next came the recordings. Marcus was careless with his tongue. He'd shout insults when Carmen wasn't home, mutter threats under his breath, brag about how easy it was to keep her on his side. I kept my phone on the counter, screen dark, MIC live. Dozens of files filled up with his poison. And the pièce de résistance, the tracker. One afternoon, while Marcus was snoring upstairs, I slipped into his room. Clothes everywhere, a faint stench of sweat and stale beer. I went straight for his backpack and tucked a small GPS tracker inside the lining. A gift from a coworker who owed me a favor. By the end of the week, I knew his patterns. The job interviews he claimed to attend were actually late mornings at the bar downtown. His gym nights were quick day tours to a girlfriend's apartment. Yes, a girlfriend, one Carmen knew nothing about. Screenshots of his locations at 11:47 a.m. and 1:12 a.m. were all the evidence I needed. Piece by piece, I was building a case file. Not for the police, not for some courtroom. For Carmen. For the day when she could no longer hide behind excuses. When I'd lay everything in front of her, the lies, the theft, the betrayal, and watch the illusion collapse. Because the only thing stronger than love is proof. And proof, once seen, can't be unseen. The net was ready. Now it was only a matter of pulling it tight. Evidence is like poison, you don't pour it all at once. You drip it, slow and steady, until the body can't deny it anymore. Carmen was in the kitchen, rinsing dishes, when I decided it was time for the first drop. Nothing explosive, nothing dramatic, just enough to plant doubt where loyalty once lived. "Hey," I said casually, scrolling on my phone. "Did you withdraw cash yesterday? $200. She frowned. "Yeah." Marcus needed a few things. A few things. I tilted the screen toward her. The bank app glowed with transactions, clear as daylight. Funny, because there was another $60 3 nights ago. And $40 before that. Seems like a lot of few things. Her lips pressed into a thin line, defensive already. He's looking for work, Stuart. He needs help until he gets on his feet. I kept my tone even, calm. Does work look like this? I swiped to a screenshot of Marcus's location history. His phone pinged at Murphy's Bar and Grill at 11:43 a.m. the day he claimed to be interviewing at an auto shop. Carmen froze. For the first time, the story didn't fit so neatly in her hands. That could be a mistake, she stammered. Maybe he just stopped for a drink. Before a job interview? I asked, letting the question hang heavy. Her jaw tightened. She turned back to the sink, scrubbing harder than necessary. You're always looking for reasons to hate him. Always spying, always digging. I wanted to slam the evidence down, to shove the recordings in her face, but I held back. Too much at once would only make her retreat deeper into denial. No, the first drop was enough. Let it fester. Let it eat at her when Marcus came home smelling of cheap whiskey. That night, when he did stumble in late, Carmen didn't meet his eyes. She didn't ask how the interview went. She just watched him with a tightness in her face she couldn't hide. I saw it. And he felt it. The first crack in her defense had widened. And cracks, once they start, only spread. Parasites don't like it when their host starts to resist. They bite down harder. Marcus felt Carmen's distance almost immediately. He wasn't smart, but he was sensitive when it came to losing control. 2 nights after I showed her the bar screenshot, he made his move. It was after dinner. Carmen was upstairs folding laundry. I was in the garage, tightening bolts on the mower, when Marcus slipped in. Door closed. No witnesses. You think you're slick, don't you? His voice was low, venomous. I didn't look up from my work. Not sure what you mean. Showing Carmen your little proof. He stepped closer, breath heavy with stale beer. You're trying to poison her against me. But it won't work. She'll always take my side. Always. Finally, I turned, meeting his glare with calm eyes. Funny. Because she didn't seem too convinced the other night when you came home drunk from your interview. For a moment, the mask slipped again, rage, raw and unfiltered. His hand twitched like he wanted to swing, but he didn't. Instead, he smirked. You think you're in control, he said, voice dropping to a whisper. But Carmen's mine. Always has been. You're just renting space. He let the words linger, like a taunt meant to sink deep. Then he turned and walked out, shoulders squared, arrogance draped over him like a cape he didn't deserve. But what he didn't realize was that the threat wasn't to me. It was to her. Because words like that, possessive, ugly, dripping with entitlement, don't just vanish. They echo. And sooner or later, Carmen would hear them herself. When I came back inside, I found her sitting on the couch, phone in hand, face pale. She looked up at me like she wanted to ask something, but didn't. The silence between us was different this time, not cold, not angry. Heavy, like she was starting to wonder what her brother said when she wasn't around. Marcus thought he'd reasserted control, but in reality, he'd just tightened the noose around his own neck. You don't need to force the truth out of a man like Marcus. You just have to wait. Sooner or later, he'll vomit it out himself. It happened on a rainy Thursday night. Carmen was upstairs in the study, finishing paperwork. I was in the kitchen, sipping coffee, when Marcus came in from the rain, shoes muddy, jacket damp. He didn't see the faint light from the cracked office door above. He didn't know Carmen had paused her work to stretch, to listen. He tossed his keys onto the counter and muttered, "Another interview done." His smirk gave him away, another lie, too obvious even for him. I leaned back in my chair. How was Murphy's? The words hit like a slap. His head snapped up. What? Murphy's bar. You were there from noon to 4. Tracker doesn't lie. He froze, then chuckled darkly. So you really are spying on me. Pathetic. I didn't rise to it. I just sipped my coffee, slow, deliberate. Pathetic is pretending to job hunt while your sister drains her savings to keep you fed. That's when he snapped. Don't talk about Carmen like that. She owes me. After everything, after what I've been through, she knows I'm the only real family she's got. You're just a placeholder. Some suit who thinks a paycheck makes him a man. His voice rose, echoing up the stairwell. He didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't care. She'll always choose me over you, he shouted, slamming a fist against the counter. She always has. She always will. The words hung in the air, thick and ugly. He glared at me, chest heaving, daring me to respond. But I didn't need to. Because at that moment, I saw the shadow at the top of the stairs. Carmen. Frozen. Listening. Her face was pale, lips parted in disbelief, hands trembling on the banister. She'd heard it all. Every word. And when Marcus finally noticed her, when his eyes darted up and saw the horror in hers, his mask didn't just crack. It shattered. For a long, heavy second, no one moved. The only sound was the rain tapping against the windows and Marcus's ragged breathing. Carmen, he started, voice suddenly soft, almost pleading. Don't, she cut him off, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. She came down the stairs slowly, each step deliberate, eyes locked on him. Don't you dare. Marcus straightened, trying to recover his mask. You don't understand. He twisted it. I heard everything, she snapped. Every word out of your mouth. How you've been lying about interviews. How you've been using me. How you, her voice broke, and she clenched her fists. How you think I'd choose you over my husband. Her last word, husband, landed like a hammer. Marcus flinched. Carmen, listen, You just what? She exploded. Blew through our money. Lied to my face. Sat here for a year while Stuart carried both of us. Her voice shook with fury. And you have the nerve to call him a placeholder. Marcus's mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked smaller now, diminished without his arrogance to prop him up. I stayed silent. This wasn't my battle anymore. It was hers. You've disrespected me, Marcus, Carmen said, her tone lowering, steadier now. You've disrespected my marriage. And you've disrespected the man who's done more for you than anyone else in your life. Marcus's eyes darted between us, desperate, cornered. You don't mean that. You're just mad. Tomorrow you'll. Tomorrow. Carmen stepped closer, her voice like fire. Tomorrow, you're gone. He blinked, stunned. Gone. Yes, she said firmly. Out of this house. Out of my life. I don't care where you go, Marcus. But you're not staying here. The silence that followed was suffocating. Marcus stood there, jaw tight, fists clenching and unclenching. For a moment, I thought he might swing, that the anger boiling inside him would finally spill over. But he didn't. He just glared at me, pure venom, pure hate, and stormed toward the door. When it slammed behind him, Carmen finally exhaled. She leaned against the counter, trembling, tears welling in her eyes. For the first time, she didn't look at me with suspicion or anger. She looked at me with regret. "Stuart," she whispered. "I should have seen it sooner." And though the war wasn't over, the battlefield had shifted. Marcus was out. But he wasn't gone. Not yet. Marcus didn't stay gone. Parasites never leave cleanly. They claw, they bite, they drag everyone down with them. It was 2 nights later, just after midnight, when the pounding on the front door shook the house awake. Carmen sat up in bed, heart racing. I was already pulling on my robe. The door rattled again. His voice bellowed through the wood, drunk and desperate. "Carmen, open the door. I'm your brother." Carmen's face crumpled, torn between anger and instinct. I touched her arm gently. "Stay upstairs." I went down alone. When I opened the door, Marcus stumbled in, rain-soaked, eyes wild. He reeked of liquor, rage simmering just beneath the surface. "You think you can throw me out," he slurred, jabbing a finger at me. "You think you can turn her against me. She's mine, Stu. Mine." I didn't move, didn't flinch. I just let him spew. Carmen appeared on the stairs despite my warning. Her voice cut through his drunken haze. "No, Marcus. I'm not yours. I'm not your keeper. I'm not your excuse." He turned, face twisted in betrayal. "Carmen, don't say that. I'm your blood. His nothing." Her eyes glistened, but her voice didn't waver. "He's my husband. And you're nothing but a liar." Marcus staggered, his chest heaving. The mask was gone now, stripped bare to the bitter core. "You'll regret this. Both of you. You don't just cut out family." "Yes," she said firmly. "You do. When family is poison." That broke him. He stood there, drenched and shaking, a hollow shell of the man he pretended to be. For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. Then he spat at the floor, muttered a curse, and stormed out into the rain. The door closed behind him with a finality that shook the walls. Carmen collapsed into my arms, sobbing, not just from grief, but from release. It was over. Marcus was gone, stripped of his lies, his grip broken. The house was ours again, quiet at last. And though the scars would linger, there was peace in knowing one truth. No parasite survives once the host finally stops feeding it.